Mark Walsh here from the Embodied Facilitator course and Embodied Yoga. So this is my little video on how to have a more embodied day. So this word embodied, coming home to the body, being present to the body mindfulness, and a little bit more than that. Videos on what is embodiment if you're new to the area, but it's trending, and people, I think people are starting to realize that embodiment is a little bit more than just doing a yoga class once a day or once a week. In the same way as self-care is more than just having a bubble bath. There's a bit more to it than that. Here's what I've found works for me, and I'm a relatively busy person. A lot of my life is kind of like a normal person's life, in that I run a business. So a lot of my days, sending emails and making phone calls and doing officey stuff, days when I'm not training, it's pretty typical for a Western person, fairly long hours and fairly busy. So this is what I found works for me, but also for a lot of students. So on Embodied Facilitator course, I've found over 8 years now, what is actually students are actually going to manage, what are they going to actually incorporate into their life. And that's the key thing, is how do we incorporate it into someone's life. So basic principle here is bookending and sprinkling. All right, so bookending, morning practice, my own practice is normally a meditation, body-based meditation, 10 minutes minimum. At the moment I'm doing a bit more than that, but that would be really good start to the day to go, right, before I turn my phone on, record a YouTube video, before I check my social media or email, I'm gonna do that at least 10-minute meditation. And if you just do one of these, do that one. Then some kind of movement practice. So I've embodied yoga or just some general hatha yoga. I have something called an embodied form you can find on YouTube. Again, 5-minute version, 10-minute version, pretty efficient, just moving the body, waking up to movement, body in movement. There's other things I might add to my routine. I'm doing trauma releasing exercises at the moment. I quite like cold showers. I do those most days. Though today I'm swimming in the sea as it's summer. Cold showers I find helpful for that, practicing the centering, the self-regulation aspect of embodiment. So not just self-awareness, but actually having some challenging stimuli to work with, and doing that deliberately because it's going to happen in the day randomly, right? There's other things I sometimes do in the morning, but that's the basis. Some sort of movement practice, some kind of just basic body awareness meditation that can be even done lying down, and some kind of challenge practice. That might look like a bit more rigorous yoga, martial arts practice for some people. But for me, a cold shower, because that's, again, in the morning, it's pretty easy. We might be looking at 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and 10 minutes, right? So there's a nice half an hour routine there. Some kind of intentionality for the day is helpful. And also just looking at my day and going, okay, where's embodiment going to be helpful throughout my day? Yeah. So I'm starting that day with that intention, looking ahead. Often that's the last thing I do when I start looking at my calendar before I start work. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing I'll do is what's called the relational practice. We started this on EFC this year. So this is the first social interaction I have in the day. Sometimes we call it coffee shop practice. This is often buying a coffee for some people is the first sort of social interaction they'll have in the day. I'll bring some mindful awareness to that. Bringing embodiment into the relational field is really important. It just stays as an individual matter. I also do 12-step meetings early mornings, a couple of days a week. So that's, I'm long-term sobriety. I don't really need them for I need a drink these days, but I do find that sort of social listening, expressing, some sort of ritualistic element, that can be very helpful. Traditionally people went to church for that, right? But I find that relational element adds something. So for me, that's another way of doing that, a couple of mornings a week. I also do the gym some mornings a week, and that's just for fitness. So I'm not trying to be super embodied in the gym. Now, I'm not dissociating and spacing out. I'm still staying present, going, oh, my muscles ache or whatever, listening to my body. But actually separating out that aim, I think, of fitness and embodiment can be quite helpful. So you're not trying to chase two rabbits. Things you do for fitness aren't necessarily the ideal for embodiment, which might be slower, gentler, whatever. Okay, so that's my normal morning routine. And with students, we might say minimum 10 minutes, 10 minutes meditation, 5 minutes embodied yoga, 1 cold shower. You can even do that in 20 minutes. So most people can manage that, particularly when they see how well that sets up their day. Other bookends, so at the end of the day, I'm normally doing what we call a dedicated embodied practice, like a yoga class, an Aikido class I did last night, It might be a conscious dance class. I do 5 rhythms sometimes, and we're picking that based on opportunity and also need. Yeah, so what's available? Like there's a 5 rhythms class 3 streets from me. There's a Buddhist center just 4 streets where I can do yoga, but also need. So what is it I need to work on? For me, for example, it's often slowing down and doing gentle hatha yoga rather than someone else might need that kick in the arse of really yang martial arts. And with my students, we ask that they do that a minimum of once a week. That is realistic for most busy people. For the dedicated, I'd say 3 or 4 times a week. 4 sort of more on than off is better if you're dedicated. And for professionals like me, I might do 6 or 7 classes a week, but I'm an embodiment professional, right? And I'd say for most embodiment professionals, 5 or 6 a week would be good to have some integrity in this work. So, the dedicated, and then there's just like the normal person who wants to work on themselves. And the other thing is, the end of the day, is self-care routine. So for me, that does often involve a bath, back to our bubble baths, but it also involves like a gentle slow down and taking myself off technology, coming back to myself, eating in a focused way, either with someone else or on my own, but really taking the food in. I often do that at lunch as well, embodied eating, so mindful eating. Taking the technology out, and the last 2 or 3 hours of my day are kind of a wind down. Might be a bit of restorative yoga, might be more time with my wife. There's that sort of ending the day in a restorative way. I have my chamomile tea or my CBD oil or whatever. So that end of the day is really important too. You can also, one thing I recommend students do is reflect upon their day. So they might do a little journal, a little diary, like where was I embodied in the day? Where did I lose touch with myself? That can be super, super helpful for students. So then the last thing there was the sprinkling. So what I recommend here is an alarm that goes off 5 times a day that reminds you to check in with yourself, and then maybe to do some centering on top of that. Sometimes I do a lunchtime yoga class, but normally, like most people, I'm just busy in the day. There are other choices in the day that I make which help. So for example, I get in nature every time I can. So I have 2 to 3 hours of work phone calls, like mentoring calls and coaching calls, business calls. I do most of those from the park, unless the client's very uptight or I know I need to be at my computer. Often those calls, I'll just walk around the park. Then I'll come home, make some notes, send a sort of follow-up email, maybe then do the next call. So I do 50-minute calls, and that gives me 10 minutes between those calls to have a cup of tea, go to the toilet, feel my body again. And then, as I said, every chance I get, I'm walking around the park. Now, I know that's not always possible for some people, but, walking meetings can be a thing. I've seen business people do that by the Thames lots of times. People in suits, it's not impossible to get out and, at least by the river or walk through Hyde Park or whatever. The other one would be being around people who are more in their body. So the communities you're around is so vital. And I found this is just a vital one, that if I can have some contact in my day with other sort of body people, even if it's like my web designer who's also a yoga teacher, that just helps me land back in, because we're embodied in relationship. Embodied in place too. So, taking care of the places we are. Like, this is my little place where I meditate in the morning, got a little kind of shrine, and it's relatively sort of clean space in my house that I can sit in and do my little bit of yoga practice in. So the sprinkling, the reminders throughout the day, the getting in nature where we can. It's just those micro pauses where we take a moment before checking the email, or, every time we go to the toilet can be another way to do that. Every time you wash your hands, every time you walk through a certain door. Yeah, and that's realistic. It may be half an hour practice in the morning. It might be 1 minute sprinkled 5 times in the day, and then some sort of an evening practice with a kind of wind down. That works pretty well for people. Over the years, we found you'll get change through that. You'll get real embodied change through that. A few intensives in the year to kind of go deeper in, even if it's just a weekend yoga retreat or weekend meditation retreat, a couple of those in the year. It's very helpful. Shinzen Young's good on this stuff if you want to know in terms of practice. Ginny Whitelaw, Richard Josie Heckler, there's a bunch of other people that talk about embodied practice, but there's my thoughts on it.